people often wait for a senior leader to make a change before they feel like they can make a change. And I say that's wrong.
ProCognita, Get Agile podcast. Leadership agility for better decision making. Interview with Pete Behrens.
Welcome to Get Agile podcast. Today with me is Pete Behrens, founder and CEO of Leadership Agile Journey. So we're gonna chat about Agile leadership, but first of all, what is Agile Leadership Journey as a product?
Yeah, so the Agile Leadership Journey is basically a licensing body. We allow guides like yourself and others who are qualified to teach and coach on a curriculum. And our whole emphasis is to balance out the predominant focus of Agile is tech. Agile is about process, it's about tools. We're really about mindset and culture. And so it's really for leaders, by leaders, and how to shape cultures for Agile ways of working.
So from your perspective, it's something you can learn about the leadership, I believe. And now, one thing I notice about the leadership is like often it just becomes something fluffy, stuffy, right? It's like a tree hanging, all this stuff. And this is why I had a lot of challenges talking about the leadership. Now, what I found in the Agile Leadership Journey is like you have a specific tool, specific let's call it resources for addressing specific challenges leadership have. I don't know if you have any one that you prefer more, but I would look at the one specific.
Yeah. Well, I think a couple things. First of all, I think most of the industry is focused on teaching Agile to leaders, and I think that's not very helpful. It's useful, but not enough. The other thing we hear a lot from leaders is, oh, this wasn't about Agile, it was really about leadership. And so when we start to think about what is it we're actually teaching, agility is a construct about movement, right? Quick movement, but it's also a construct around quick thought. And when we put it together, quick movement is not very useful without better decisions. And so it's kind of like that dog chasing squirrels, it's wasted energy. And so what we're actually doing is teaching a very disciplined approach to leadership, a pragmatic approach, techniques, models, for leaders themselves to think about how they think and how they're behaving as a leader that enables more agility in their day-to-day piece. So one of the tools or frameworks we use is something called leadership agility. It's really just a model of self-awareness and layering that happens that when you start to activate it, it enables agility in their behavior.
And what I really like about this model is like you can reflect on where you are, where you want to be. This is a great thing. The second is like it is not black and white, so it's not like you can just be in one place at the one moment. So let's dig into this model. So if you can just give you a rough idea for our our audience, and then let's see how it can be used by the leader.
Sure. Well, first of all, recognize, right, the construct around leadership agility is something that's been researched even back in the 80s and 90s. I was introduced to the concept with a book called Managing for Excellence, David Bradford and Cohn, a couple of authors. And there they start talking about levels of leadership, self-awareness, behaviors. Bill Joyner added to that with leadership agility in 2007, and that's when it really started to intersect the Agile space with leadership. So leadership agility is really thinking about maturity in your own thinking that starts to add layers. You say it's not black and white, and what we talk about is there's not better or worse, it's more about awareness and choice. So what happens is as you build your layers, you're adding ability to choose. I see more, I have more choices in front of me. That's the kind of the seeing and that mindful agility. And then I'm able to situationally adapt in a certain situation. That's your movement agility. So the construct around, we use terms expert, achiever, catalyst. It's not, worst, better, best. What that is saying that when I go from expert to achiever, I'm adding a layer, but I continue with that expert and achiever. And then I go to Catalyst, I'm adding yet another layer. So the reason they get better is that I'm able to choose more. So I can go into an expert mindset by choice.
So you get more, let's call it tools. I don't know, it is the right word. More options.
Yeah, more choices.
And more awareness about, why doing one thing or another, right? So more aware decision making.
Yeah, and that's just one layer. We start to introduce things around, right, what my power style is, and all this is layered around your awareness as a leader. So I become more aware of time. I become more aware of the system I'm working in. I become more aware of myself. These are all dimensions that as you start to build that awareness, you start to get more options and choices, and you get the chance to then, in a situation, decide, what do I believe is the best in this situation? And I think one of the things that leaders love about this is, in every situation, there's not a right or a wrong. There's simply an awareness and a choice. And so, yes, you could choose a path and say, I'm going to take a more assertive approach on this, or I'm going to take a more kind of like, I'm going to come in and say, this is crisis, I need to make a decision. The reflection of, okay, I did that, and now I reflect on that, that's what adds good or bad to it, yourself. Like, did that work? Didn't it work? What worked? How did that work? How could I do that next time? That reflective format, that's where growth starts to happen. That's what adds the good or bad to it, is yourself reflecting on how I did in that moment.
That's cool. So, well, yeah, I'm looking at a few directions here, but basically what I'm saying, what I'm hearing here is like we got a system when the more aware about yourself you are, the more likely you have going to have a better choice, or more options also, you have a better chance of making a choice, but you need to do the reflection, which basically lead us to this kind of PDCA cycle on the board for ourselves, right? Now, maybe it would be a good idea for our audience just to have a little more information about those three levels.
Sure.
So what is inside, right?
Yeah. So let's dive into that, right? Most leaders start out in what we call a pre-expert stage. I'm not good at anything, so I learned something. For me, that was engineering, right? I became a pretty good software engineer. So what's my natural place for leadership is as a tech lead or as a manager of engineers. That's what we call expert leadership. You are an expert at something. You're good at leading people of that skill. The pros and cons of that is I can be really hands-on. I'm digging in. I'm passionate about what I do. I remember as a manager in that, right? I'm still coding. I'm still designing. My engineers trust me because I'm in their work every day. So as an expert leader, you're trusted, you're respected, you're looked up to in many ways. The downside of that, though, is you have a tendency to micromanage. You have a tendency to tell people because you know more than they do. So it's hard to hold back. It's hard to let others fail.
It's faster if I do it myself.
Right?
I mean, the quote I love about the expert is like if we can just clone ourselves. And then I'm hearing this in the organization recently. I get the conversation. If we just could clone this person, like. Okay, I know.
Well, who hasn't had that thought, right? Like, it'd just be faster if I did it.
Yeah, I'm gonna do it better. Except we don't have 1,000 of you, right?
And that's part of the problem. Those expert leaders get too busy. They become a bottleneck. You're kind of operating this expert mode. If you really want to shut your door or turn off your kind of Zoom internet to work, right? Your head is down. You're in the work, and there's a time for every leader to dive into work, and that's okay. Even the most senior leader, even CEOs do work, right? There's a time where their head is down into work. So that never goes away. It's just your focus and what you're good at will change as you develop as a leader.
And then we have an achiever.
Yeah, so really as you think of shift from expert to achiever, for me, it came when I became responsible for people I was no longer an expert in. It was testers or UX, user interface, user design people, technical writers, things like that in my world. And so I could no longer lead from an expert orientation. You're kind of forced in some way. If you've ever taken a director level, project management level position, you're leading people, you've never done their work. So it's an enabler where achievers excel based on getting disparate groups of people working together effectively in team. You know, you think of facilitation, coordination, strategy, alignment, influence. You know, you're getting everybody working along on the same goals, and achievers completely outpace experts by their ability to get teams to deliver value.
So you're thinking about the classical structure of the organization. The first layer usually can be the experts, and then the second layer, because they are too far away from doing, well, they should be too far away from doing. I remember organization which wasn't the case, but anyway, most organizations, they're too away from the and if they're trying to be an expert at that moment, it's fails.
Well, and you would think that. I was a VP of engineering, still deep in design, still wanting to code, right? Here I'm in charge of leaders over other leaders, and this happens all the time.
I'm more talking about the expectation. If we look at the organization, then
expectation, as we go up in leadership, you should be focused on more of those coordination activities and less of the doing of the work. Now, you're doing changes. Now, maybe we're doing strategy. Maybe we're doing budgets. Maybe we're doing, performance reviews. We're hiring. So there's other doing, but it does change. But more importantly is really that mindset. And one of the things that when we teach leaders, one of the things they start to self-reflect is most achievers feel they're already at the next level. We call catalysts. The reason is they work well with people. So they think, oh, I'm a catalyst. I'm engaging and empowering. And the problem, the differential that really comes in is achievers tend to drive what they believe is right. They've delegated the how. They've delegated the doing. But they haven't necessarily delegated where we're going. And so that tends to be what we call that strategy. That's like, okay, this is where we're doing. And that's important and purposeful, but at the same time can become limiting, especially when we work in complex spaces. Is that the right direction?
So this sounds like we are expecting leaders to come with the vision and, it sounds like this one, or like it's the vision for the will be true, too narrow in this case.
The point in, one of the keys in leadership, like you don't have leaders unless there's followers, right? You don't have leadership unless you have some form of influence, right? And so leaders are important, especially achiever leaders are important, because for an organization to be effective, we've got to get multiple people in different roles working together on combined goals. And that's the whole point. But it's not the end point. And this is where a lot of leaders get stuck. They get so focused on the products, the deliveries, the services, all the things that are going on in the business, they're unaware of the next step. And that's one of the big eye-openers we have when we start teaching leadership is opening a new door for these leaders that have peaked out in their leadership.
So the focus on execution, not the strategy, will be the expert level, or will be the
Well, it can be both. So for example, let me share with you. If I am defining and helping build that strategy, I could take an expert approach to that. I built the strategy. I could take an achiever approach where, hey, let's coordinate, but ultimately I'm responsible for that strategic choice. A catalyst, and as we start to go up even further, I might decide, hey, this is a strategy we're going to co-create. Everybody's involved in, or multiple people are involved in the creation of that strategy. It's not just my choice. So even something as strategy or budget or it can be done in different mindsets.
I will go back to the catalyst because we haven't looked at this one yet. But what I was thinking about is like often when I meet leaders, they're so busy with the execution they don't have the time to think about the strategy.
Yeah.
Like, I have so much on my plate that I cannot think about the next week basically. Yeah. So they're so busy assigning tasks, and this more sounds like a specialist expert role, right?
I would call that an achiever who has an overemphasis of expert. So they're feeling too responsible. we can actually get just as dysfunctional the other way. I call it the hollow achiever, meaning there's no expert inside. This is the kind of leader who's coordinating but has no sense of actually what work is going on. They're not connected to the experts. They might push things, but they have no respect for the expertise. So you can get two dysfunctions. Like you said, almost too involved or not involved enough. You're just aloof. So it's finding that balance is really tricky for achievers.
A little sounds like all those committee who has no idea what we're doing,
Exactly.
but looking at the, it's
Exactly.
green, yellow, or red, right? And it's red, do something about this, yellow, do something about this, green is okay, but we have no idea what is happening.
Yeah, we call it hollow leadership. So we've developed the second layer and we've either dissolved the first layer or it was never there in the first place. And so that can be just dysfunctional. Okay. This is the fun and the trick of it. Yeah.
All right. So the last you mentioned the catalyst.
Yeah. So the same process exists, right? Expert to achiever, you're adding a layer, but you have both expert and achiever. As we go into the catalyst, we're adding yet another third layer. So think of the nesting dolls, right, that you're pulling apart. Expert, achiever, catalyst are all inside the catalyst. So one of the myths, right? The misassumptions of catalyst is it's only catalyst, when in fact it's really a combination of all three. Another misinterpretation is catalyst leadership is servant leadership. My role is to serve, my role is to defer, my role is to support you. That's a piece of it, but it's a very thin piece of it. Again, we call that a hollow catalyst. So as I'm going from achiever to catalyst, the big changes that are going on, the number one change is going from a state where an expert and achiever is rooted in, I know how to do this, I know what to do. The catalyst all of a sudden is shifting a mindset into, maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm not the only one who knows. Maybe I have an idea, but this is a vulnerability. Brene Brown calls this the courage to be vulnerable, to be open, to be wrong. That's a huge gap. That's a huge step for many leaders, and many never make that step. That's one. Now, we can go into others, which is about my time horizon. How am I looking at the future, as well as the system? And I'll just mention one point. So you mentioned vision. Achievers have vision. But usually that vision is focused on what we do, a strategy, an execution, a service, a direction of the market. Catalyst vision is more about who we are. What is our culture? What is our people? How are we working together? So the system is more of a human system than a business development system.
All right. Now, what I started thinking about is when we start talking about the different behaviors, basically what is usually happen when you start working with the leaders, they learn those new behaviors, they start to behave differently until something bad happens. And then the moment that, there's a pressure, there's a deadline coming close, there's other people yelling at you, the old behavior kicks in. And it sounds for me like one of the things, like, first of all, knowing where you are is one thing, is like not to forget about those tool skills when you're under pressure, because what we know is that under the pressure you lose some of your let's say capabilities as a person, right? I mean, you revert to some basic reaction because it's super hard to work under the stress. So I don't know if there's anything in the program that is here to help those people, to understand this one. I believe there is something about this PDSA cycle we mentioned, but probably there was more on that.
Sure. Well, one of the things that I became frustrated with was, the model around leadership agility is a good theory. But what about in practice? Like, what does that actually look like? What are the tools? What are the approaches? And one of the things that I had to go through and try to figure out is, how does this pair with actual, like, science and techniques and approaches? And some of the best work comes out of neuroscience. How does our brain react in situations? And we're all human at the core. We all get threatened under stress, right? Under pressure, under time, under, just the threat of, something bad happening, right?
And then you have a freeze, flight, or
that's
fight,
the human.
right?
That's the human. So what you're describing is time pressure pushes us into those expert and achiever dimensions. Now, if that's a choice, if I'm aware of that choice and I make that choice and I say this is a crisis that needs specific, clear direction. There's a fire. We need to move out of the building. That's a perfect example of a catalyst or an achiever situationally adapting to the moment and taking a choice that's meaningful and purposeful and correct.
Yeah, most likely you're not gonna discuss what is the best thing to do now.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Let's have a conversation.
So the danger, though, is we get into crisis culture. Everything's a crisis. We get into making those decisions under pressure without even being aware of those choices. So we're all susceptible to cognitive bias. We're all susceptible to our own blindness of who we are and how people see us. Most leaders, including myself, are unaware of how they're being perceived. This is where most leaders overrate themselves. Like achievers believe they're catalysts. Experts believe they could even be achievers. This is why 360s are incredibly valuable in terms of giving you some feedback on how others see me.
Before we move forward, I know what is 360s. You know what is 360s, maybe not all on the audience, so just like a one sentence more on this one.
So basically a 360 is me getting feedback from myself, from people maybe below me, above me, around me, right, giving me feedback in a tool or otherwise.
And hopefully use as a feedback, not as a tool to reward you, because otherwise,
Feedback should be a gift, right? Yes.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, what often is happening in the organization is being used for, setting the salary and then the magic things happening.
Can I share one example of feedback? So I did a 360 at one point, and I had my peer group, my managing partners of our company, give me some feedback. And there was one example in that 360 report that jumped out to me. And it was, Pete, we hired that COO. We hired a COO for our team. And they said, you asked for feedback, but you already had your mind made up. So my feedback was useless. And I had to go back to that point and think, oh my gosh, like that was probably true. My mindset at the time was, I want your feedback, a little less about should we hire them, and a little more about how should we use them? Because we're like you, we're a small company. We hire somebody and they're not always in one role, right? They play multiple hats. And so I was looking at feedback more about, hey, can we put them in service? Do they work just internally? But the way I asked for feedback was just more around, should we hire them? And so my mindset and how it came out were totally different. And then how that's perceived felt manipulative. And I thought, wow, like I would have never known that without that feedback loop. So it's just one small way, right? This happens every day. Our intent and how people see it, we miscommunicate all the time.
All right, and we made a detour from the stressful situation.
Oh.
So yeah, but that I mean that's pretty cool example, right? So just to say that's just to show it's not a theory. You want
to get back to the stress?
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, stress pushes us into others. The earlier forms, the more kind of expert and achiever-oriented leadership styles. Even so much that I've had a person or two in my class come through and said, Pete, our culture a catalyst could never exist or succeed in our company because of that time pressure. And people have said, well, there's so much pressure in the market, so much pressure in the stock prices, so much pressure in the short-termism of organizations.
Some companies that just reward firefighting, basically, right? If your project is going fine, if your work is going fine, no one noticed. But if you're, putting out the fire you just created like half a year ago because of bad decision half a year ago, then you're a superhero.
So let's ask, why do organizations reward, number one, heroism, and number two, we measure things around the expert and achiever, right? We measure, did you get the budget met? Did you meet your project deadlines? Did you satisfy your customer delivery? Why do we measure those? Because they're easy to measure, right? Time, money, requirements, right? Those are easy to measure. Doesn't mean they're right. Like, did it actually meet the customer need? Did the customer buy again? Those longer term, like culture, health, mindset, right? Safe, psychological safe, like those are harder to measure. So what we often do in organizations is reward the expert and achiever behavior because they're easier to measure.
Okay, I'm gonna mention this one because we hit this one on the culture. One of the great things about the Agile Leadership Journey is you also use some tools for understanding the culture. One of the few things, rarely see, everybody's talking about the culture, but no one, mostly doesn't know, except it exists, except it's important to change it, and no one knows how to do it. And one of the great things is like, that's gonna be separate conversation probably, but one of the things I want to stress out is like, you have a tool for having a conversation, a reasonable conversation, a real conversation with leader. Where your culture is, how you want to move your culture, rather than, we want to change the culture, which is most common conversation I've seen.
Well, first of all, culture, a lot of leaders roll their eyes, right? Culture is this weird term and it's hard to understand.
Yeah, for me, that's like with this leadership. We need a lot of leaders. We need to change culture.
So what we try to do is make culture tangible, pragmatic for leaders. So just number one, but a leader's personal thinking and behavior drives culture. So number one, we try to relate how you yourself shape culture as a leader. And we call that microculture, just small things that you can do to shape culture. But yes, then we have tools to talk about the macro culture, but these are very, again, pragmatic tools that are easy to understand, that leaders that come through the program start to see their culture a little differently, and it makes sense. We don't have the time to go into the details of that one, but yes, that is something that we do help leaders with.
So we got this culture of all the deadlines passing by, all the pressure, all the firefighting. What you do about that, right?
Yeah. Well, just like myself, right? I will improve with data. I will improve with feedback. I will improve with self-awareness. The same you can apply to an organization. That organization, if you can shine a spotlight for leaders and a leadership team on the organization itself, demonstrating that and getting feedback on the organization, on the culture, leaders can change that, and leaders do change that. Again, what often happens, we're just so focused on delivering and working on delivering value for our customers, we're just not taking time on looking at that system. So it's almost like giving pause to a leader or leadership team and saying, hey, let's just look at this. Is this what we want? Is this the kind of culture we're creating?
Which also put us into, again, this PDCA cycle. So PDCA cycle, when you need to have a time to reflect on the, so we get this on the leader level, we need to have this on the organization level. And it sounds for me the very first step is like a leader wants to make this change, because one of the bad thing about the feedback is you're getting this one and you, people are not used to getting feedback, and it is stressful. Talking about the stressful elements, like getting feedback from most of the people, especially at the very beginning when they're not used to, and on the feedback they get a great job. That's what you often get in an organization. It is stressful, right? So I don't know if you have anything for the leaders to tell them how to start with this one, like where to start.
Well, with feedback, it can happen very small. You can ask at the end of a conversation, how'd this go? Like, can we do this differently? Right? Just simply asking at the end of a meeting. Like,
Now I'm thinking you should do this at the end of the recording,
or
when we finish.
Go meta. Yeah, no. So a lot of times we put too much baggage, or it just small steps, feedback, ask how things are going, walk, or the Gemba walk, right? Walk around, ask people. So it doesn't have to be a big 360. But I think more importantly, I think people often wait for a senior leader to make a change before they feel like they can make a change. And I say that's wrong. As we go up in leadership, usually what happens is it becomes riskier to do change. So we often find the best activation layer for an organization is actually in the middle. It's what we call the activation layer. It's the people who feel the pressure from above but are activating teams below. It's that middle management. That we find is the best place to make change. They see most of the system and they see most of the problems. And we'd love more leaders in that layer to be the activators. They're the ones that are going to help their leaders above them see more and even change their approach.
This just remind me about common situation on every training. You have people saying, "Okay, my manager should be here," right? Like why I'm here with my manager is not
Number
here.
one thing we hear.
And the other thing is like the story I'm always saying in this case, like we have a customer, and we have worked with this board of directors or with executives of this customer, and we're saying you should reduce the number of projects you have in progress, and they say that would be the last decision we could make as executive. Then the next day there will be a new executive in our place, and we expect that people are the over us in the organization structure has more power, but often they have the same constraints or more constraints because other people are looking at how they make a decision, how they spend money, all this stuff. Like Buzz Bode was saying, like he had a conversation with one of the CEO, and the CEO said, "We just got a new company. We just bought a new company, right? And there are like 100 developers I don't need, but I need to incorporate them into my organization because otherwise, I won't be a CEO anymore, right?" All right. So to conclude, if people would like to learn more about the Agile Leadership Journey and especially about this model we just discussed, what do you recommend to them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, as anything, right? Putting Agile Leadership Journey into Google will get you there. And we have lots of information.
Just to mention, because I don't know if you're going there. You have blog, you have videos.
We even have a podcast called Relearning Leadership, where we really explore some just rethinking. Like we're really interested in kind of looking at leadership in different lenses, but it's a lot of times it's just that first step, going into an introductory class and just seeing how this is a little bit different. That can be an activator. Most of the clients that start to get engaged at a leadership level or starting to think about change differently, it's been sparked by one person in the organization being that catalyst for the rest of the organization.
And I'm going to mention this is the first step, not the last step.
We call it a journey.
Yeah, most people forget about this. Like again, when I run the certification training, I say, okay, this is like a driving license. Doesn't mean that you know how to drive.
Exactly.
It just means that you're still like most of the. I mean, as compared to most of the other drivers on the studio, at least now you need to go on the right side in this country, right? Anything else we should mention?
Well, I would just suggest that, it's not rocket science, but at the same time, it is different. And, to just be curious around what this looks like and recognize in the industry, going to an Agile leadership class could be one of 100 things. And not to say the other ones are wrong, there's wildly different approaches. There's no standard. Like with classes, with certifications, with programs, what you're going to get. Agile Leadership Journey is trying to create at least a consistency of models and approaches. Kind of like if I were to ask for an Agile class, it'd be like, what am I going to get? Scrum, Kanban, Safe. I don't know. But you go to a Scrum class, you're going to get Scrum, even if it comes from different providers. Yeah, well, hopefully. But the same is true with Agile Leadership right now. Like, what am I going to get? You get a wild card. So Agile Leadership Journey is trying to provide a consistency, models, frameworks, tools, guides who are teaching it.
All right, thank you. So if you find it interesting, we have all those links under the video recording. Thanks for the conversation, and we wish you a little more awareness about your leadership styles in the future. And if you like the podcast, please don't forget to subscribe, and we're gonna have a few more videos coming soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
To learn more, visit procognita.com/getagile.